Good morning. Do you have any questions for me? And any questions from experiment 6? We open the lab manuals I could share with you. Wow. Let's see your questions first. The lab manual. Okay. Go to your questions if you have any that I can answer. Okay, Simon. Okay. No questions? Can you tell me what's the purpose of today's experiment? Purpose of the experiment?
To determine the molarity, molar mass, and acid ionization constant of a weak monoprotic acid.
So we want to determine the acid ionization constant. What's the symbol for that? Acid ionization constant.
Ka.
Ka value. Very good. So we are trying to determine the value for Ka for a weak acid using titration. And also we are using a pH meter. When you do titration, there are a couple of definitions. One is the endpoint reaction. The other point is like equivalence point. Endpoint of reaction is the time that there's a color change. The indicator changes color. That's endpoint of reaction. That indicates that stop adding more of the standard. Point of equivalence is where the solution, the mixture, is neutral. That means you have added enough base to neutralize all the acid, and the number of moles of acid and base are equal at that point, and is known as the point of equivalence or equivalence point. So the approach in 1045 for titration was use of indicator. For 1046, we are using the pH meter. So if we expect at the equivalence point, the pH is neutral, pH of 7, then we can plot the graph of the pH based on increasing pH based on adding sodium hydroxide or the base into the weak acid solution. So first we have we start with the acid. How do we know that we start with the acid? Whenever you have a graph, you look at the definition for the X and Y value. The X value says volume of the base added in milliliter. The Y value shows the pH. So we see the pH is increasing. So as we are adding a base, pH is increasing. This means that you start with the acid. If you started with the base, your pH would have been up here, and then it would start decreasing. But since you start with the acid, the pH is going to increase gradually. When you are going to record numbers, and when you are recording numbers, make sure you create a table that shows milliliter of base added and the pH at 0 time and every 0.5 milliliters being added. And we usually stop when there is like a big jump, and after the big jump we just continue for like 3 or 4 more readings to make sure that there's no like a secondary jump, or we have a proper graph. Can you tell me, how do you find the value for Ka? What are the steps? What would be your first thing to do? First, you have to you are going to do the titration and plot a graph, the titration graph. When you have the titration curve or titration graph, then what? How do you use the graph? I'm presenting the graph now, is on the board, is being shared. Using the graph, what would be your next step? Yes, Nia.
You would find the halfway equivalence point.
So in order to find the halfway equivalence point, you first have to find the equivalence point, right? Because equivalence point is more obvious, and that's like when you have like a big jump that the acidic solution is changing to basic solution, and this point of the graph is going to show you the equivalence point, and the pH is about 7 because the number of moles of acid and base is equal, and depends you are starting with the weak acid or weak base. And then at that point you find the volume. Let's say this volume is 20. If that volume at the equivalence is 20, you divide 20 by 2 and you get 10. On the graph, you find the volume of 10, okay? Volume of 10, and at that point, 10 would be the half the volume of the equivalence. Do you follow me? If the equivalence point happens at 20 milliliter, half of that volume is going to be 10. So you mark the 10 volume or 10 milliliter, then you draw a line to cross the graph, and from there you extrapolate to get to the pH. So these are the steps that you take. First, you plot the graph. Second, you find the equivalence point. Third, from the equivalence point volume, you divide that volume by 2 to get the volume at half volume of the, so that is known as the V half. When you find the V half, then from the V half, you find the pH at V half. So pH at half equivalence point equals pKa. So you see the steps? Because I'm not going to tell you how to add the base, how to read the burette, and how to do this, because it's a 1046 lab. You already know that. You don't want me to take your time for that. These are just the steps to approach the purpose of the experiment, trying to find the Ka. So what is the next step? So you find the pH at the half equivalence, and we know that is the pKa. What's the next step? How do you go from pKa to Ka?
You put pH equals 10 to the negative pKa.
Okay, instead of the pH, no, pH doesn't equal that. Ka equals to 10 to the power of negative pKa. Very good. So pKa is the log of, negative log of Ka value. And if you want to take it back, you are going to take the anti-log, or you say that it equals 10 to the power of negative pKa. And that is the purpose. And also is asking you to find the concentration of the acid. In order to find the concentration of the acid, you need the concentration for sodium hydroxide that you are using. So if your concentration for sodium hydroxide is known already, or you do the standardization first and you find the concentration for sodium hydroxide, then you can use the molarity or concentration of sodium hydroxide in order to find the concentration of the weak acid also. Because in order to find the concentration for sodium hydroxide, you don't use the vinegar, you would use like a KHP. And with the KHP, which is a primary standard, you can find the value for concentration. So your first step is you standardize your sodium hydroxide. And in order to standardize that, you are going to use the potassium acid phthalate or KHP. And you measure the mass. Those numbers are provided in the video. And based on how much or how many milliliters of sodium hydroxide is needed to neutralize, let's say, 0.8 grams of the KHP, is going to help you to find the concentration. You need to know the definitions for molarity, for mole. Just make sure that you have, you know that to calculate number of moles for KHP, it would be mass of the KHP divided by molar mass. That gives you number of moles of the KHP. Number of moles of KHP equals number of moles of sodium hydroxide. And then if you have the number of moles of sodium hydroxide, you divide by volume of sodium hydroxide, that gives you the molarity. So the formula here is provided. I just want to make sure that you understand what these numbers mean. This is the molar mass for KHP. KHP is not potassium, hydrogen, phosphorus. Is a phthalate, is an organic acid. So the molar mass is 204. And you find the molarity for sodium hydroxide. And then you are going to use that sodium hydroxide with the known molarity. At 0.5 milliliter at the time, you record the pH, you plot the graph, and from the graph, you're going to find the Ka value. Questions? Questions for me? Very good. pKa equals negative log of Ka. And if you want to get Ka, you take the anti-log. Or say Ka equals 10 to the power of negative pKa. Okay. If you don't have questions, this experiment is kind of long because we can't just pour the liquid. We have to add every like 0.5, and it takes time. So I'm going to let you go ahead and watch the video after I call for attendance. But if you have questions, I want you to ask your questions now. This is for attendance. Megan? Megan, are you here? Tiziana?
Here, Professor.
Thank you. Okay. Juan? So Megan is not here? What about Juan? Okay. Simon?
Here.
Robert? Natalie? Aline? Janelle?
Here.
Caitlin? Thank you. Isabella? Nia?
Here.
Andre? Andre? Camilla?
Here.
Thank you. Kaylin? Jonica? Neftali? Oh, no, not Neftali. It's not here. Alex? Yes, I did, Natalie. Okay. Crystal? Thank you. Alana? Navid? Daniela? Luke?
Here.
Thank you. Naya? Sabrina? Jobin? Okay. If you have questions, you may stay, ask your questions. If you don't have questions, you are going to watch the video. Let me go to chat room if there is any question. Is there only one assignment due next week? We are doing experiment 6 now, right? So it would be the make sure you include the graph in the lab report or the data sheet, and then you're doing the pre-lab for experiment 7. So it would be 2 assignments for next week, unless I didn't update the assignment. Data lab, I only see. Okay, I will open the pre-lab for 7 as well. I will make sure that the pre-lab for 7 is open for next week at 11 a.m. And I'm glad that you are reminding me, because I want to make sure. Okay. So data sheet and the pre-lab for experiment 7. That would be next Wednesday. The 23rd at 11 a.m. Okay.
Hey, Professor. I didn't hear my name called. Andre.
I know. I saw you're there. I called a couple times, but it's all right.
Hold on.
I got.
You got me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Pre-lab is open for next week. Okay. Any other questions you might have? No questions? Okay. If you don't have questions, enjoy the rest of your day and start watching the video, please.
Hey, Professor, I had issues doing the honor lock. Is there going to be anything? Because I've done honor lock before, but is there anything that I need to do? Because I had issues doing it. It wouldn't work for me. And I've been trying to do it, but now it's asking for passwords and stuff, and I haven't been able to.
Okay.
Now it won't let me get it.
Okay, the only reason that it can ask for a password, there are actually 2 reasons. One, I have not, okay, it could be that one, it's the problem is me, I haven't set up the course. Second, it would be the problem is that you don't start with the tutorial. Each time, for the first time, you have to start with tutorial. And I am actually going to honor lock now to make sure that my honor lock dashboard shows that the assignment is.
Yeah, I'm actually not a real big fan of honor lock. Their system does not. It's so, sometimes it takes you 30 minutes to get into a test.
Okay, this test, is already, the setting here is fine for the honor lock. So since the setting is okay for the honor lock, it's enabled, then you have to start from tutorial and go one step at the time. And if you do that, it will not ask you for I did enable it, it was enabled. So it's not going to ask you for password. That could be the only problem that students they have. And if they try going from step by step from tutorial, then it will behave better, at least. Not perfectly, but better.
I'll give it a try. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? If you don't have questions, you can start watching the video or continue with the data sheet, recording your numbers. If you have questions, let me know, please. I'm going to stop recording here.